Okay, so let's talk about all the drama that's going on out there, all the controversy that's been happening over the last few days. Now, I'm sure people are going to ask, why did it take Rob so long to respond? Well, I'll be honest with you guys. After I first saw Ernie's video, I was pissed. I was incensed. I don't think I've ever been that angry in my entire life, right? Because the whole video was effectively a hit piece, right? And it was just dragging me through the mud. It was leaving out statements that I had made in that video on Twitter that didn't make me look racist, and then keeping statements that actually made me look racist. So, like, as an example, one of the things that I said in that video on Twitter that Ernie left out and just kind of skimmed over and grouped into, then he started talking about some, erroneous, unnecessary things, is that when I sit down and I make a video, I do not at any point take into account the skin color of the writer, the artist, or the main character, their race, or any of that stuff. The only standard I use is whether or not I enjoy the story. The only time that race plays a factor is if the race of that character is an intrinsic part of that story. And that's when I use the example of Blue Marvel, right? And kind of gave a quick bit of a synopsis in order for people to understand how race played a role within that story, right? And how that kind of feeds into whether or not, I focus on race when I'm talking about making a video or deciding to make a video. But yeah, I was mad as hell. Like, I was fucking pissed. And there were a lot of erroneous claims that were made in that video. For example, one of the things he said is that my audience is mostly white. I mean, he doesn't know that because I don't know that. And I don't know that because YouTube doesn't tell me that. YouTube gives me a lot of analytics, but as far as I know, there is no analytic that shows what the skin color of a viewer is. I mean, I can see if you're watching on an iPhone, I can see what state you're in. I can see what time of day you watch my videos, right? I can see a lot of information about you as a viewer, but I cannot see your skin color. I can see if you're male or female. For example, my audience is 96-point-something% male, but I don't know if you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever the case happens to be. So that was just kind of an outrageous claim. The idea that I was giving shit to Angel Reese on Twitter because she was black. I don't know where he got that from. I was giving her shit on Twitter because she's an asshole. And I don't know anybody who would doubt that claim, right? Or at least was coming off as an asshole at that point. There were a lot of claims like that, that were being made, that I don't like being black, that I intentionally whitewashed my avatar. I mean, these were honestly, in seeing a lot of that, the video just looked like it was coming from a place of anger. And it looked like it was coming from a place of, Comics Explained is going down a path that I don't like, or at least I perceive he is. And I'll talk about why I think, that's the perception, but I perceive he is. And therefore, I'm going to make a video that does everything I can to tear him down, I mean, there's accuracy in the statement that I don't follow Milestone, but like I said, it just didn't resonate with me on a personal level. And I'll stick by that. I'm not going to apologize for not enjoying a comic book line, which is the point that I made in that video on Twitter. There's a lot of comic book lines that I don't find enjoyment with. I'm not a huge fan of G.I. Joe. I think All Hail Megatron is like the only story arc I've ever enjoyed from Transformers, right? But again, those things got left out because it was much easier for me to simply just take out that segment of me saying, I'm not really a huge fan of Milestone. And then to say, Rob doesn't identify as black, that kind of thing, right? So that's why the whole video felt like a hit piece. Now, whether or not it was Ernie's intention to create a hit piece on me, I don't know. But if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, whatever. And so following that, right, I had to calm down. I had to calm down because, don't get me wrong, I had every urge to clap back and to call this man every name, everything in the book, but a child of God. Like, I had every urge to do that. And in fact, I actually fired up a live stream yesterday, and then, once the live stream was done, YouTube uploads live streams. It kept giving me upload errors. I don't fucking know, right? I feel like these days the website only ever works half the time, and when it does work, it doesn't work right. Fucking AI. So, having said that, once I saw that it was all starting to pick up steam and everybody was starting to make videos, right? People on TikTok were making videos, people on YouTube were making videos. TikTok was pulling no punches, right? It was nuts on TikTok. When people on TikTok, people were making their videos, I just sat back and started watching it, and some of the people who were making videos, I mean, they were just trend jacking, right? People talking shit about Comics Explained, I'll get my licks in too, get their views where they could. And some people were genuinely upset. But from what I gather, the only thing that I think most people really wanted to know was that when it came out that I followed Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic on Twitter, that in that statement in the video that I made, where I said I listen to people like them because I'm not 100% right, and they're not 100% wrong, that statement came off as very ambiguous. And people wanted to know, what do I agree with them on, right? So, in seeing all these videos that people were making, and how it was all snowballing, people were saying things like, I bet Rob's a Trump supporter, like, I bet Rob's against trans rights, I bet Rob's definitely racist. All right, let's get some motherfucking shit cleared up right now. My guy, there has never been a time when I have been a Trump supporter. And I am not a fan of what ICE is doing out there. I got brown skin, in case you didn't notice. So the Supreme Court and Clarence Thomas, who doesn't know he's black, they name me public enemy number one. Right? At any point, like every single day, I get up and I go out into the world and I know that some ICE agent could run up on me and tell me to produce my papers, right? And if I tell him, well, if I ask, why am I being asked to produce my papers? You're going to snatch me out of the car, put me in cuffs and drive me. I live with that anxiety every day, right? So yeah, no, I am not a fan of what they are doing, right? I don't understand, like, I don't know why anybody would believe that I would be against trans rights. What's the problem? Like, I don't understand that. Like, why would you look at a person who's felt out of place, off kilter, doesn't know who they are, and then when they finally figure it out, it comes through transitioning? Why would you give them shit about that? Right? So no, I don't have a problem with any of those things. My life philosophy is simple. Live your life in a way that does not bring harm to other people, and don't be an asshole unless other people are an asshole to you. And that's it. Right? But to the point of what I agree with Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker on, right? I agree with them with the idea that there is merit to the argument. People become attached to superheroes. They don't want to see them change. They don't want to see anybody else take their place. Where we part company is when they say it's a problem when superheroes are switched out for other superheroes, but they only talk about that in relation to Sam Wilson replacing Steve Rogers. And they say nothing about Wally West replacing Barry post-Crisis. And they say nothing about Barry replacing Wally in the New 52. If you legitimately believe that your favorite superhero is being replaced, or superheroes in general being replaced, is a problem, and you really believe in the argument or the idea that there are people who become attached to those heroes and don't want to see them change, that applies across the board, regardless of the superhero skin color, right? That's where we part company, right? I agree with them on the idea that that scene between She-Hulk and Bruce Banner, right, when She-Hulk is screaming about how, she's always angry and that kind of thing, that was incredibly poorly handled. I disagree with them that it was her getting catcalled sometimes, right? I disagree with that. Honestly, I don't think that scene went far enough. What I think that scene should have done is it should have brought some real world shit into it. I know the whole show was a comedy, and that's fine, but I feel like it should have brought some real world shit into it, which is to say, what should have happened in that scene is it should have been Jennifer Walters telling Bruce Banner, yeah, I'm always angry, Bruce. I am angry because as a lawyer, every day I hear the stories of women who are victimized and no one believes them. The institution won't believe them. Every day I hear stories from women who were told by the men in their lives, oh baby, I'll love you forever. And then as soon as she gets knocked up, he bails. And now she's got to track him down for child support. Every day I hear stories about women who hit the glass ceiling for no other reason than the fact that they are a woman. So yeah, Bruce, I'm always pissed off. Now, I'm not pissed off because of what happens in my life. I'm pissed off for them. And I'm pissed off because I know that there's nothing I can do about it. Because it's the very institutions that exist out there that are making life harder for them, right? That's what I would have done in that scene. Captain America Brave New World. I agree with them with the statement that Captain America Brave New World was trash. And I agree with them that Sam Wilson as Captain America has been handled piss poor by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I disagree with them about the statement that the Sam Wilson Captain America is an ineffective, is a crappy Captain America, that he's a shitty Captain America because he's not Steve Rogers, which is a point they've made on Twitter, right? Because I don't watch their videos and I don't subscribe to their channels, FYI, right? But I think, looking at Captain America, Brave New World, that movie was trash because to me, that movie didn't go far enough, right? When I look at that movie, and I've gone on record in saying this, right? I'm pretty sure I have a video where I talk about this. In Captain America, Brave New World, what I would have done is I would have continued the story of Isaiah Bradley. And then I would have just brought in, I would have made it basically a combination of Weapons Plus and Captain America Red, White, and Black, right? Where it goes into the story of Isaiah Bradley and it shows, right? Isaiah Bradley's platoon being experimented on by the US government. So basically the Tuskegee experiments with super soldiers and the super soldier serum, right? Which we got some of that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but then the movie starts going deeper, right? And what the movie does is it highlights how minorities were viewed by society back in the 1960s, 1950s, 1960s, 1930s even. and how they were the subject of various experiments. And Sam Wilson learns about that. Now, the Weapons Plus component comes by way of that was the government trying to make super soldiers. So maybe you just introduce some new characters along the way. But that's what I would have done. And in fact, I've been advocating for that for a long time. Right? Like, when it comes to the worldviews of Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic, no, we do not walk side by side. And do not trick yourself into thinking that's true. But when it comes to their takes on comic books, comic book movies, I agree with some of them. For example, I disagree with the idea that women don't watch comic book movies. That's nonsense, right? That women in general. No. The Wrap had an article that came out in like 2023 or something like that when the Marvels released. 41% of viewership was women. Now, I don't know about you, but 41 is a pretty big number. If I change your DNA by 41%, you'd be a tree. So 41% makes a big difference, right? Percentages matter, right? And so it's not as though women don't enjoy superhero movies. The Marvels failed because that movie was fucking trash and the plot was terrible. Right? So no, I don't follow the worldviews of guys like that. But to the point of why it is that I do follow them, which is another big point of contention. People ask, why do you follow people like that? Right? I follow people like that for the same reason, right, that I explicitly stated. I'm not 100% right, they're not 100% wrong. But people like that do keep me in check. Right? To me, it's no different than following CNN and Fox News. Right? Two competing news sources. Right? I follow people like that because they espouse a lot of extreme right-wing stuff. They certainly have some anti-trans views. And if I were to simply just ignore people like that, then how do I know that my belief is an actual correct belief? Now, some of them are irrefutably correct, right? Like some of them, obviously, they are 100% correct, right? Why would you ever believe that trans people don't deserve rights, right? But then what if I start finding myself deviating to the side of like the far left, right? Billionaires are the problem with everything, and my life would be better if they didn't exist. No, because on the right, they'll say things like, well, what are you doing to try to improve your life? Because there are things you can do. Are you doing the best you can in the face of that? In an age of smartphones, where people can become millionaires with nothing other than an iPhone, are you exploring that, right? I mean, there's merit to making arguments like that. Right. So that's why I believe listening to both sides is important, because it keeps me in check. It keeps me from deviating too far to the right or the left. Now, I know that kind of pisses people off, right? These are extreme times, and extreme times call for extreme sides. And so people want to see you pick their side. I mean, that was Ernie's point. Ernie's big point was that I wouldn't pick his side, right? I mean, what other point is there, right? I mean, he's clearly mad because I identify essentially as a centrist. And if I said I identify with Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic and their political views, he'd be even more pissed off. So what side's left? Right? So, you know, I mean, that's the argument that was being made there. But I will not apologize for being a person who walks around the world and looks at varying political views and says that, with the exception of calling for the restriction of human rights or civil rights, with the exception of trying to eliminate entire groups or something like that, that there are precious few instances where people are 100% right and the other side is 100% wrong, right? It all falls somewhere in the middle. Having said that, yesterday, I had this great big huge conversation with Sirius Television. It was like an hour long, right? He was one of the channels that was calling me out, right? And so I was like, okay. The whole reason why I did that whole conversation with him is because I felt like he was one of the people who wouldn't immediately demonize me, right? For the purpose of you know, clout or something like that. He would actually let me talk, right? And let me say what I had to say. But one of the points that he brought up is he said, you are a huge content creator. Like, when it comes to comic book content creation, I am the biggest comic book content creator in the world. Full stop, right? There is no arguing that, right? 100%. I am the biggest comic book content creator in the world. And the point that he was making was that there is a measure of responsibility that comes with, you know, the people that I follow. And I told him, you know, to me, when it comes to following someone like Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic, I didn't really consider that to be endorsing them. Endorsing them would be promoting them, would be telling people, you should go follow them. It would be telling people, you should go watch their videos. It would be telling people, you should, you should support them financially, right? You know, whatever financial, you know, options they have that are out there. Basically driving attention and marketing and advertising for them. But simply following them and observing them, I didn't really consider that, you know, to be publicly endorsing them. And he said, yeah, but like some of your followers will look, like people will look at you and they'll be inspired by you. And in that inspiration, they will follow the people that you follow, which I don't necessarily know if I agree with that, right? And so after that whole thing is done, I'm talking to Mariah last night. And I asked her, what do you think? Like, what do you think about that? And she said, well, on one side, you're not in charge of your fans. It's not your job to provide a moral compass for your fans, right? And to make sure they believe in the right thing, right? That's not your purpose. However, you are, like, she was like, he's right. You are the biggest comic book content creator in the world. And then she's like, with great power must also come great responsibility, right? So it's an answer that it's a question I'm still trying to find an answer to, if I'm being honest with you guys, right? I don't know how to balance my personal convictions and my personal beliefs that it is necessary and honestly appropriate and level-headed to follow both sides, so long as one side's not calling for the restriction of civil liberties and the outright elimination of any one particular group or anything like that. As long as they're not calling for harm to other people, to be willing to listen to that side, and to listen to both sides, while at the same time recognizing that there are people who do follow me and who do look up to me in some capacity. I'm still trying to find an answer to that question. So, having said all of that, this is the last I'm talking about it. I am not here to rant and rave about politics or my personal worldviews. I'm here to cover comic books. And I am here to shit on the Inhumans. Because the Inhumans really are trash for real, though. Like, that's all I'm here to do. Peace.